Hey everyone, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Nick. We're with Orange Sparkle Ball. And thanks for having us at the AI and the Creative Industries talk. And as was just mentioned, I know there have been a lot of other great speakers, and we might be coming with a slightly different angle, really from the creative services side, but really interesting take on storytelling and how you can use that to accelerate the adoption of new technology. So Ashley's going to take away the first few slides. We're going to dive into it. That's maybe enough of an intro about us, yeah?
Yeah. So we are Orange Sparkle Ball, and we really help people tackle new ideas and new initiatives. We work with a lot of corporations, we work with startups, we work with impact groups. And while those three groups of people might seem really, really different, really the process of getting something new off the ground looks really similar across the board. So you really have to convince people that your idea is good. You have to convince them that they should invest their time or energy or money into it, and you have to get them excited about what the outcome is. So we work with all different types of people doing just that. So these are some of our services: product design, brand development, organization design, environmental design, and service design. And really what we do is we sit down with clients and we talk through what they're trying to do. What is the message you're trying to get across? Who are you trying to talk to? And help them fill the gaps in their story with these services, among many, many others. And something that we've found across the board with clients is that technology and AI is extremely difficult for people. Clients often don't know how to get people to agree to adopt new technologies, whether it's lack of understanding or not really believing that your product's going to work, or being afraid that it's going to disrupt your everyday life the way that you live it. There's really this large barrier to entry of getting people to adopt those new technologies, and a lot of times those are the gaps that we're working through. So when you look up AI, and when you look up AI, you get tons of different results, and AI adoption specifically. And this is one of the quotes that we found when you look it up. The job of a manager is to help people cross the bridge, to get them comfortable with technology, to get them using it, and to help them understand how it makes their lives better. And really, really often, you find that this idea of getting people to adopt new technology is extremely difficult for people. And what we like to say is, how can a story bridge this gap? How can we help you through storytelling to get people to adopt AI and to visualize themselves using it and see how it can change their everyday lives?
Which is kind of our role as creatives when we're approaching these stakeholders that are struggling with how do we get here, or is this going to be okay? What we do as creatives is help bridge that gap with storytelling. We storytell the gap. So we're going to focus a lot on storytelling. There's a lot of ways you can tell a story, especially as creatives. There's a million different mediums that we could tell a story in. But agnostic of the medium, what we can do is tell a story of current or future state tech and bring that to life for people today in a way that makes it accessible, believable, achievable. So we can really accelerate change by doing just that. And to help frame this thinking, because I know it's a little out there and maybe different from some of the other lectures, we're going to show two video examples that really frame this up pretty well. These are examples we've pulled from pop culture, and they're pretty different. So as you watch them, think about when this story was told, what the current state of tech was at the time, how this story would have made you feel at the time, and also even today, while watching it, how does it make you feel? They should autoplay.
What you watching?
It's the billionth rerun of the Flintstones.
Here goes! Yabba-dabba-doo! Hey, look out, Fred!
Yabba-dabba-doo!
Kenny, count down. How many times have I told you no TV in the classroom? What have you to say for yourself? Yourself.
I'm sorry. Boing!
So that was a 1960s example of the Jetsons episode. And this is a 2018 ad by Samsung.
When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be?
Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Is what she said to me.
Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
So we mentioned that there's this bridging the gap problem with helping stakeholders or anyone adopt new technology. And effective storytelling, the gap, will make new tech seem friendly, attractive, and it will make you feel ready for the new technology. In the case of the Jetsons example I first showed, the goal of that was pure entertainment. So they were able to cast a really far future vision that skipped over a bunch of different advancements in technology because they weren't really concerned if technology was ready or people were ready for this Apple Watch-like device in the 60s. They were more concerned with, are people ready to be entertained by this notion? But what they did do a good job of was casting this attractive view of technology. I never want to watch the Flintstones on a tube TV if I could watch it on my smartwatch. And they definitely made it friendly. That robot is hilarious and friendly. If a little kid could use a smartwatch, so could I. So it comes across as entertainment, especially when you're representing a gap this big in what current state of tech is, what people's understanding of tech is. So that's what we call the entertainment gap. The Samsung ad is a little bit closer to what we're calling the acceptance gap. If you look at that Samsung ad, there's some of the tech in there exists today. I have a Samsung phone in my pocket that was on that ad. But that sonogram thing, I don't think that exists, but I want it already. It was attractive. I definitely, if I ever am pregnant in the next years, I'm going to make sure I have one of those. And it's that few steps that we call the acceptance gap. And they were able to effectively storytell in a way that made us see their products were ready and our desires are ready for these new leaps in technology. So in both examples, by storytelling future state of tech, we were able to accelerate the adoption of current or near state tech and the adoption of it. And this is where a lot of our work falls, is in storytelling gaps about this size. And when you look at it being called the acceptance gap, it's usually in our work, stakeholders who are questioning whether they should invest in these leaps in technology or they should roll out current state technology, and it's getting them to accelerate through that acceptance curve is where we really leverage storytelling the gap.
So Nick touched a little bit on how this storytelling can really accelerate change and accelerate the mindsets of our clients' clients or our clients' customers. And one thing, we're going to go through a few examples of this. One thing Nick touched on was AI friendliness. And to give you guys a little bit of a more tangible example, if you think of Siri, Siri is an excellent example of AI friendliness. When it first came out, it was not something that people were really comfortable talking to a device. You know, you're talking to your phone. And Apple did a really exceptional job of making Siri a very friendly thing to participate in. You talk to your phone, you ask it a question, it gives you directions, it gives you answers, it performs text messages and calls for you, and it does it in a way that makes you smile and occasionally makes you laugh. And I think this is an excellent example of how you can lower the barrier to entry and get people to accept this maybe creepy thing of talking to your phone with its responses and how it's integrated into your everyday life. So one application of this for us was helping a small business, a startup, in understanding how this friendliness played a role in a customer service type bot. And it was a Facebook Messenger platform where customers could have a conversation and give feedback on their experience. And how do you take that situation and make it something that people are interested in participating in, but it's also, you get something out of it. So for us, this looked like creating a whole system of interaction around this customer service bot. So how do you have table tents on the tables when you walk into a restaurant? What is the conversation that's had with the barista or the person behind the counter? What is it that they give you that makes you want the reward that is being provided for this feedback? And then on top of that, really, how does the conversation with the AI bot go? How is it structured? How is it friendly? How are you compelled to continue to get that reward? So there's an element of looking at the entire system and really thinking through each customer touch point and how the outcome is beneficial for all parties involved. So in this case, people provided their feedback, and then small business owners that wouldn't ordinarily get feedback from customers because they maybe can't afford to pay someone to go out and do those explicit surveys, they now have a bot that does it for them, and they can receive feedback from their customers, and customers get something in return. So the result of this was this application set in motion in several restaurants around the metro Atlanta area, and a whole new set of tools to be integrated with this AI platform. And really setting up recurring monthly revenue for our client, as well as feedback for businesses all over Atlanta.
So the next topic is AI readiness, and that quote from earlier on comes from a Google search mostly about AI readiness, so I know that's an entire topic, a whole rabbit hole we could dive down, but I'll back it up and talk about the way I'm thinking about readiness and where our work example kind of falls. And to build on Ashley's example of Siri, I think when we think about readiness, to demonstrate that, I would use Amazon Echo, Echo Dots, or Google Home. These smart speakers that we've decided to bring into our house are building on top of that friendliness. We got comfortable with Siri enough that we said, I'm ready to bring that into my home. It's not on my phone anymore. It's not just on my phone, it's now in my home. But the other side of readiness is that device ready for the future? And by bringing these smart speakers into our home, we are readying ourselves for future advancements in AI. We know that these interactions with our smart speakers are fairly surface when you think about AI, but we are readying ourselves by putting them in our homes now for what's coming down the line. So an example from our work is in a digital menu boards installation. So I'm going to show some visual examples of digital menu boards behind us. These are examples we've pulled from the industry to sort of illustrate what digital menu boards look like if you haven't seen them. But we were approached by a department within a larger organization who was convinced that digital menu boards were the right decision to roll out chain-wide. The problem they were having was convincing the stakeholders higher up that the complexity of the install was not an issue. Basically, they needed to convince them that stores today are ready for this install. The other side of that, though, is if they were going to invest their money and do this huge rollout, would this technology be ready for the next step? Was it future-proof, or was it an investment they would have to continue to make over and over again? So the way we solved this problem with them was by creating a two-part video. The first part, we would focus on the ease of install. So we actually flew to a location that decided they would roll out in one location. Let's do this. Let's do the whole process. So we went there and documented them taking down the static system, hanging the new boards, coding the new boards, loading creative onto the new boards, and presented that in a time lapse while also cutting in customer testimonials, employee testimonials, manager testimonials, and really use the power of storytelling to evoke the emotion about it, where these stakeholders really care about what one location is going through. We're able to show them that, look, in one situation where all these locations look the same, this is how easy, seamless, painless it went. The second half of it addressed that other side of readiness. If we do this today, are we going to have to do it again in a few years? And to answer that question, we actually worked with the digital menu board company that did all the coding and the back end of it to have them demo for us on camera examples of future state technology that would be layered on top of the system once it was rolled out to show them that if they invest today, we're going to be able to roll these things out on top of it to increase their customer service model, to build on their already great existing customer service model. And in that second half of the video, we even story told an imagined customer journey in the future where a mom and her kids pull up to the drive-thru, the license plate is read by a digital menu board, an AI bot is suggesting to them, based on your previous order, here's what you might want today. Do you want to use your rewards points today? If so, please pull forward to the next menu. So we were able to effectively show them that the investment today, you're ready for it, all of your stores are ready, and also if you do it today, you'll be ready for the future, much like the Google Home example. So the result of this work was that the group received budget to install digital menu boards, all locations, chain-wide.
So our last example is around autonomous vehicles, but before we get there, I want to go back to those examples that Nick and I have been giving and talk about someone who does attractiveness really well. And the company that comes to mind immediately is Tesla. Tesla came onto the market several years ago at a time when a lot of these technologies weren't being discussed. It wasn't something that people were really considering in their everyday lives. And they made an entire industry surrounding the attractiveness of these vehicles. They were designed extremely well, and they made people want something that still might be a little bit scary in some capacities. And while they started a lot of conversation surrounding people's fears, it was fear wrapped up in, ooh, but I kind of still really want that. And they did an exceptional job of integrating new technologies into being attractive solutions that you didn't even really know you wanted. So one example of this in our work is autonomous vehicles. And we were asked to help a greater organization understand how autonomy can play a role and will play a role in the future of the industry. And that's a really difficult thing to do because when you're talking about something such as autonomy, it's frightening. And while it might not be a solution that you need to implement now, it's something that needs to have a certain level of attractiveness so that you know how to implement it down the line when it is a more common solution. So what we did was create a future state video, what we call a proof of concept video, to show how this technology could potentially be integrated into the workflow. And that shows the technology in a way where some of it's real and some of it's not real, but how can we make people believe that this solution could actually solve problems for the client? Next one. So this was a really amazing solution that allowed people to see, oh, this really isn't something that's extremely far out. It's not something that's in 20, 30 years. It's actually something that the steps that need to be taken to get there aren't as large as people make it seem or the industry makes it seem. So really, like I said, lowering that barrier to entry and getting leadership and people in the organization to understand that it's coming and it's exciting and it's attractive. And so the result was that many groups across the organization actually started looking into autonomy as solutions for their specific problems. So everything from customer delivery all the way through to supply chain, people started thinking about, well, how can autonomy help me? Which is such an amazing thing to be able to get whole departments moving towards this future-looking solution.
So, why storytelling? We talked very high level about some of these things and pretty granular about some of the project examples, but the overall thing that is always consistent in our work is we're helping tell stories or telling stories. And storytelling is an incredibly powerful medium because it taps into emotions. When you tell a story, you're connecting with people. There's no greater connection between two people than a shared story. So I strongly consider for that reason alone, you consider storytelling in your AI journey or tech journey, but also you can make technology familiar to people by telling a story in a familiar place to them, with familiar people to them, and that's how we brought to life some of these examples, that autonomous vehicle thing especially, it was showing familiar parts of their customer service process, familiar parts of their story, just layering in new tech. The other thing, make technology accessible. I say this is the reason we watch unboxing videos, because I can't get the new phone today, but you're making it accessible to me by telling me your story of having it and showing me what your story looks like having the phone. So I think I encourage you guys to think about storytelling in a bunch of different ways as you approach conversations about AI, conversations about new technology, all of your classwork and papers about AI and new technology. Know that storytelling is an incredibly powerful way to influence people, to accelerate them through all of the difficult, challenging pitfalls of adopting new technology. And we wanted to leave plenty of time for Q&A, so we did just that.
Thank you guys for giving that. It was a really good presentation.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to go back to was the digital boards that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And one of the big focuses, not only was the implementation of the boards themselves, but what you were talking about, the constant update. When we need to make sure that these things stay futuristic, how do we do that? Is that a cloud-based system where they're pretty much getting updates just automatically and you don't have to send a technician out? That company doesn't have to send a technician out?
That's right. Yeah, that was a huge part of the second half of the video, or I guess even the first half of the video that kind of bridged the gap, was showing them once these boards are up, we're not going to leave you hanging. Like the benefit of these boards was that updates can be put down to the store immediately. There's not shipping out a new thing to slide in and take the old one down. So that was a huge value add for people. And we actually, in those demos we did with the menu board company, we had them demo some failovers, as they called them, where they showed, here's what happens when one board goes down, the other ones compensate for it. Here's what it looks like when you need to change a price or when you're out of an item, how you can immediately update the inventory. So they were working with, there is a third-party partner that they would communicate with if anything went terribly wrong. They had access to someone, but a lot of it was supposed to be automated for them and take away a lot of pain points or time that they're spending flipping boards or putting stuff in and out. So we were able to really demonstrate the return on investment today, tomorrow, and when you scale that, those little bits of time people spend doing stuff, just like you mentioned. Yeah.
And the return on investment was a huge piece of this because, as you guys all know, technology is expensive. And so it's important to detail out what is the return long term, because in all forms of AI, it's usually a payout over something that's very expensive in the moment.
And there was a lot of getting them comfortable to the point of readiness, getting them comfortable with the static version of their boards is what customers are used to. We don't want to add too much on top of it and change our customer service model. So it had to be presented in a way that you put this up today and we'll be able to push new tech to your store when you're ready. When you're ready for that license plate reader, your board is ready. So once it's acceptable in your customer service model for that to be a piece, then it will be pushed down to the store. Much like a Tesla, you don't have to drive it in, you just get the new features on your dashboard immediately. So that was a similar setup with them.
So the license plate is pretty interesting. How would you get people to accept that?
Yeah, that's interesting, and that
I think that touches a lot on sort of the readiness aspect. So the question is, are people ready for that? And while that's not necessarily something that's happening now, the fact that it is a feature that could be integrated very easily was society to get to a point that they are ready for that. The system is capable of it. The system is ready for it. So showing that it's a possibility down the line is very intriguing, whereas I think the answer to your question is no. People aren't ready. People aren't ready to have that kind of information be supplied. But if people are excited about it, taking the steps now to get people ready and to begin to integrate that into a system is important to start thinking about, because when people are ready, they're ready now, and they're going to expect it.
I think that's a good example of how you could storytell the gap. Like very specifically to that example, we could create a video that tells a very specific use case of a mom and kids. Is she feeling comfortable with the security about her license plate being read? But then you show all the added benefits through the story and how much time it saved her, and you bring forward a level of comfort in the emotion of the story. And I think you squash all of the qualms that people had about, what if they know my license plate? Am I going to get pulled over because they saw me in the car doing this at Chick-fil-A, this location, and this location, and this location at Burger King? They know where I'm at. They're going to send me ads. And that's a big fear. Like, if you're driving around Atlanta and pulling up to different locations, they might know where you are. But I think if you start to storytell around, look, these are all the added benefits. We know all these different locations you go to. And next time you're at one of these examples we threw up, we're going to know just these little bits of info about you and only suggest things that you want. And adding on to, what is it called? Like the customer service apps, all of the rewards points apps, I think you start to storytell natural extensions in a way that people feel we're ready for this half step and we're friendly already with the app, and it's just a natural addition to it.
So when you guys are consulting with these companies and you're talking to the shareholders and stakeholders, like you're saying, as young initiative creators, I guess you guys are past students, not only how do they take you seriously, but at the same time, how do you keep up? How can you make sure that everything you're talking about isn't something that was pitched to them a year ago? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, that's a very excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it really takes putting yourself in their shoes and really sitting down with them and trying to understand where they're struggling. And then once you figure out where they're struggling, it becomes easier to be a third party. It becomes easier to say, well, here's what I'm hearing, and here's what I think about this situation. And obviously in those conversations, they may say, well, we already tried that. Here's what worked, what didn't work. But really being able to be the objective third party is really helpful in that situation. Because if you don't understand what their mission is, then leadership or customers or investors certainly aren't going to understand it.
That's a good point, yeah.
So I really enjoyed this bridging the gap component, because everyone in this degree program is learning new technology, they're learning storytelling, they're learning design, and they're learning sort of design thinking and user experience in human-centered design. What other skill sets do you all yourselves learn, or do you look for, what helps you have such a nuanced approach to this? Because many people want to jump to Black Mirror and being like all wild about new technology. So I just would love to hear sort of what skill sets you all have or admire or look for or are working on for yourselves.
Sure. I think Nick and I have very different backgrounds.
Sure, and that's also really attractive too, just to see how you came to where you
Sure. So I personally have a background in industrial design from Georgia Tech, and that to me, industrial design is the holistic view of a product or service. So really from someone having a problem all the way to selling a solution to that problem and everything in between. So how do you research surrounding that problem? How do you come up with a solution that will help people? How do you get them to accept that solution, invest in your solution, and then actually how do you manufacture that solution? So it's kind of a very interesting background of a lot of different things, from physical building all the way to interviewing people and conducting observational research. So I think that sort of holistic view is usually how I tackle projects. How do you really put yourself in the shoes of not only whoever your client is, but also the people who might be interacting with it, or the investors or the leadership that they're talking to? How can you look at each of those parties and figure out how they feel the way that they feel, and more specifically why. Why do they feel that way, and what are their unique motivations, so that you can then design your solutions and your storytelling specifically to what they want to know and why they want to know it.
Vastly different than my background for sure, but I think after I give you my background, we'll touch on like how we work together so well and how our work is different kind of entirely than our backgrounds would lead you to believe. But I'm a SCAD graduate. I went to SCAD Savannah and I studied motion graphics. It's a very cool major called motion media, actually, which is very multidisciplinary kinds of animation and video production. So I loved already that nature of multidisciplinary design, but I have focused mostly hard skill wise on video production. So kind of the most literal form of storytelling in this day and age, other than like a book, I guess. So I craft stories on a visual timeline every day. But I think the way I think about storytelling has really evolved since I've been with this company and worked with other multidisciplinary designers, in that storytelling is a tool agnostic of a medium. It's not video. It can be a case study PDF. It can be a customer journey mapped out on a whiteboard as a form of storytelling. So I think that's where this melting pot of all of our experiences really helps us be so nuanced about the way we think about this stuff. Is we're solving real problems. We're not to the point of the Jetsons just making entertainment. I could have easily gone TV and film and just made beautiful, amazing stories that made people cry. But I think it's far more impactful to tell a story that wins someone huge budget numbers to roll out something as significant as a chain-wide technology change. That feels just as cool to me to make a video that accomplishes that than to make someone cry at the end of Marley and Me or something like that. So I think especially Ashley and I have worked together for years now, we've started to, instead of telling people, I make videos, I'm an industrial designer, we tell people first that we accelerate change, we work with startups, that's kind of what we lead with and what Orange Sparkle Ball has become known for, because it is a differentiator for us and it is very nuanced, to your point, and not the way a lot of people think about their creative services or technology and helping other people adopt it. That was a great question.
Can you give us some insight on what kind of programs you use as far as the storytelling and everything that goes behind putting a story together as far as production?
Sure. I would say that we start usually on a whiteboard table, almost always.
Yeah.
A lot of wireframing, pencil to paper, just trying to sort of like structure things out and move things around.
I mean, if we're doing video, like to the video example, I work pretty much in the Adobe suite in Premiere. Sometimes I like to bring elements to life through animation. You can really lean into like a return on investment case like this. It's great to bring charts to life and really draw people in with added After Effects animation. So for that literal of an example, I use Premiere and After Effects. But to Ashley's point, we love whiteboard tables at our company because it's a lot of strategic mapping stuff out before we ever touch an editing program or Illustrator or InDesign. It's more consulting than anything, a lot of sitting with people and talking and listening. More listening than anything, I would say, listening is our biggest tool.
And I would say that we will usually whiteboard something out or draw it on pages of paper and then detail out exactly what's going to go in that section of the video or that slide or that document. And then we'll usually take it to the client and do a very similar exercise with a client to have them say, no, this needs to go here. This isn't really the story arc we were going with. This isn't getting to the end goal. And we'll sort of like reorganize everything in real time before we go and do video shoots, and then come back and try and restructure all the clips into the story flow we've already organized.
It's a good point. If you're going to tell a story, it's very important to map it out before you go and just start shooting or just start producing assets for it. For the story of the digital menu boards rollout, before we even took off, we knew exactly what the stakeholders wanted the story to be, what we were there to capture, and how to come back and really plug in those pieces to tell the right story. And of course, there is that back and forth of like, hey, the story arc has changed. People are adopting this faster than we thought, or we've hit some roadblocks and we need to change the story to curve a little. And we're always open to that kind of change, but I think it's very important that you map out the entire story, even if it's not going to turn into a video or a PDF. It's just a conversation in a meeting with someone. I think you can put yourself through the steps of, what is the story I intend to tell or that they need to hear to be able to get to that next step?
And how do you push that initiative whenever you're talking and consulting with somebody where they have that story that they want you to tell, but through your creative mindset, you might want a different alternative? Obviously, you want to give them what they want, and then you want to offer around, hey, we were thinking along these lines. Is it company to company with that pushback?
That's a really good question. I think what helps us is we pride ourselves on being very integrated into people's teams. So it's weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings, it's phone calls, it's constant check-ins. So that really when you get pushback on something, like when you make a suggestion and they don't agree with it, it's really understanding why they didn't agree with it so that you can then reroute the solution again to go back to, okay, you didn't like this solution, but I'm not liking your solution. So there's some middle ground there. And I think being super integrated into people's teams helps you have a level of understanding about where each party is coming from and how you can always meet to find the best solution for where you're going.
Yeah, and being so integrated, sometimes you'll be working directly with someone that thinks the stakeholder above them is concerned about this, but when we're working so closely, we know that actually here's the problem that they presented to me, and here's how I think we can storytell around that to help you get past that roadblock. So being as integrated as we are with some of these corporations really does help us know the full picture and not just be kind of in a silo with one department where we're saying, this is the specific problem, this is how we tackle it. It's here's the larger roadmap of how you're going to knock down these roadblocks and get there.
And don't get us wrong, that doesn't mean that we don't ever disagree with our clients.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
Part of being in the creative industry.
right.
Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
I think starting as far from scratch as you possibly can and integrating whoever the stakeholders are in every single piece helps you to not get too far and too invested in a solution before you have them on board.
So I have another, so it almost sounds like what you all are talking about is, I think many people kind of get the idea of prototyping a product or even a solution or a service, but you all are a little bit talking about prototyping a story. And so that's really interesting to me, and I'm wondering like how you break it down into components that get changed by the conversations that you have with your, with your clients, or, I don't know. How do you, I'm just curious if there's any ways that you break it down, or is that pretty organic?
It's somewhat organic, but I think it gets to where I was at with, we can see the whole roadmap of if we are working with one stakeholder within a smaller organization, we know that they've got this person to get on board and this person and this person. So instead of going huge picture, let's show them what it looks like to have an AI chatbot. It's let's show this person what it looks like in their department to roll out an AI chatbot. So we break it down into little steps of acceptance to get the larger organization on board, if that makes sense. So it's more granular, like small goals to get overall adoption or overall budget wins. And that just kind of comes from knowing the departments we work with, but also taking the bigger picture, the bigger story, and breaking it into individual connection points with how is this person really going to buy into this idea? They don't care about what AI is going to come and if it's going to read a license plate or not. What they care about is the paint on the wall going to be messed up behind it when we install it? So it's like, oh, the story has to cover all of that. It's not just fancy, flashy, here's what these boards look like, and oh my gosh, your donut's rolling down the table. It's like, what does this look like for the person that owns this restaurant today to take this down? It's that level of buy-in on new technology that you might not ever think about, but it is an all-encompassing story that we have to think about.
I would also say that there are, to Nick's point, of several stories going on at once. It is a lot of different conversations, especially when you're fusing something that actually exists with making something brand new that doesn't exist. It's like you map the overarching story of what you're trying to do, but you're also mapping how would this system work, because you don't want to show it working in a way that doesn't align with company values. So you're almost writing the story of what are you trying to accomplish, but also let's pretend for a minute that this is a real solution, and how are we making sure that that is still aligning with your company mission or values or end goal.
You just said something, one other thing that just came to my mind, but it's disappeared. Oh darn, it's not gonna come back.
Well, email us if you think about
Oh,
it.
I will. Students, do you all have any other questions? yeah, this is super fascinating. It's really, I definitely like the idea of telling, it's science fiction. Basically, it's like mini science fictions, like mini futures, mini versions of the future, but that are not scary, but also not perfect. So figuring out how to tell, science fiction.
Right.
A little bit, yeah. There definitely is elements of that sometimes, especially in that autonomous vehicle. There was a little bit of it exists and it doesn't exist, much like that Samsung ad. So I hesitate to use the word movie magic even, but in specific examples like that, you're bringing what's real and what's almost real to life through editing or something, and it can accomplish those goals pretty effectively.
Well, and to dive into a little bit of our other work as well, to Nick's point about we don't just storytell with video, we storytell in all sorts of different ways. There's also some framing that has to go around the distribution of things like that, because you do risk, like with the Samsung ad, that people are going to think, wait, does that ultrasound thing exist?
Yeah.
Because I want it, and now I can't find it, and now I'm confused as to whether it exists or not. So the positioning of a video that gets distributed where you're making something seem real that isn't,
Like Magic Leap.
like magic.
Yep.
Exactly.
Magic Leap,
The
yeah.
whale that came out of the basketball court that was
That
fake.
that crazy
Yeah.
projection mapping.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting ways. Like the Jetsons example was where our brains, at least mine, went very early on in talking about this. And Star Trek and other examples from pop culture are the first thing you think about storytelling and imagined future. I mean, Back to the Future is a great example. There's a drone walking a dog in that movie. That was totally not feasible at the time, but it got us really excited, but in a way that, in relation to our work, again, falls in that entertainment gap. And so it's like amusing to think about, and I think it did help set a framework of thinking around it, and is a good thing to lead people to more of this acceptance gap. And what we're trying to accomplish is a much smaller gap, but it can be entertaining, and it can be like that Samsung ad. I'm excited about every piece of that, and I don't know if half of it's real or not, but it comes across a little bit different than when you watch Back to the Future or Star Trek, and you feel more ready and excited about the technology because it might be here tomorrow. With the Jetsons, it was like, this is really crazy and cool, and how exciting to think we could be there one day.
And I think it comes back to your point about readiness with regard to a license plate reader. It's how do you frame that in a way when someone watches it, they aren't immediately up in arms about, like, I don't want people to do that. Is that happening to me? Is that integrated into, such and such places? I think it's around framing what you're showing people and having them think about, okay, that's really interesting. What would bother me about it? How can we tackle those security issues and whatnot? How can we begin to be ready for something like that, rather than getting on the defensive about, we're not there yet, but we're hoping that one day we will be.
I think that leads to the unique nature of storytelling, is that you can tap into that emotional response more than you ever could with it's going to take this many hours to roll this out. It's going to take this many man hours to do this. Like, that's fine and good, and it might get some people on board that are more check off the list of what I care about, but when you're going down to the level of the store and it's a store owner's money that you could be messing with, it's very important to tap into their emotional response, or to the consumer driving through the drive-through who doesn't want their license plate read. It's important to let them know your emotions are understood. Here's our emotional response in this story as well. So I think that's where storytelling is incredibly unique, and how you should position your storytelling to really tap into people's emotional response, maybe